Well, hey there, my friends. Welcome into another episode of the Web Design MBA podcast. Sure hope this finds you doing amazing, and I can't wait to talk about today's subject matter on the concept of discovery. The title of today's episode is Discovery is a Deliverable. And what I hope you discover, pun definitely intended, is that you find the unlock that you've been waiting for in your business. Some of you, this will not seem relevant. Many of you are probably going to have big questions about how this works practically. I'm going to try to answer some of those questions in here, but it's definitely something that we'll have to talk about more than just this episode. I want to convince you, though, hopefully by the end of this episode, that you will at least take seriously this concept of discovery, because discovery is a deliverable. It's something that you're already doing, and my bet is that you're not getting paid for it. And the first time you get paid for this, you are going to be like mind blown at how much better that was. So let's talk through this. Here's the core question, right? What the heck does a website cost? What does a website cost? It's like a very hard question to answer, right? It's kind of like saying, how much is a car? There's lots of options, lots of things that you can do. And unless you've niched down so tightly that there's only one thing that you offer, which is probably not the case for most of you, then there is going to be in your projects some aspect of discovery. You're going to have to spend time knowing or learning about the client's business, about the scope of the website, frankly, before you can answer the question, what the heck does a website cost? And here's the thing. It's the first thing that the client wants to know and the last thing that you want to tell them, right? Why? Well, usually for a couple of reasons. One being that you need more information, and the second being that you want to hold that card in your back pocket until you can justify your value and what you bring to the table. We all know that price shoppers are not giving us the opportunity to showcase our value. And a lot of times people who are shopping just on price are not the best client anyway, but that's a discussion for a different day. So web designers have yet another problem that is rarely addressed. And that is that usually our first product, which is actually usually our only product, is too expensive. Now, I'll admit that this is something that I have aimed to combat with subscription web design, and I'll talk about that a little bit later on. For those of you who are new to the concept of subscription web design, it's basically charging a subscription fee instead of large upfront project costs, like, a traditional project costing would be like a 50-50 or like a 50-30, 30 type of thing. There's all different kinds of these, or 50-30-20, sorry. But subscription web design aims to combat that a little bit. But regardless, it's like jumping straight to marriage without the dating phase, because even with subscription web design, I'm signing them up for a minimum 18-month contract. And, it's a lot to go from basically a zero trust environment, having no relationship at all, to jumping into an 18-month commitment. That's a hard thing. So what you need is a dating phase, right? You need something, to entice them with, or to give them, or to help build that relationship before jumping into the big fish. And if this is discussed in the web design community at all, it almost always shifts to like marketing services, like Google Business Profile setup or something like that, which is fine. I'm not against that. I've experimented a little bit with that, and I plan to do more. But not everybody wants to do that. Some people just want to make websites, and I do think that you can still just make websites, and especially if you're in that boat, then today's episode is going to help you a lot. The other times when I do see this addressed, the context is something like an audit, right? Like a website audit or a marketing audit or something like that. But at least here in the United States, like, the term audit is not something that's very sexy. Like, who wants to pay for an audit? Not me. The audit brings up, the concept of an audit like brings up the IRS coming in, to your business and ruining your life by combing through all of your records. Nobody wants that. So, yeah, you can frame it differently, but like, again, even these audits that people sell, and people do sell them successfully, I agree. And an audit can be part of a discovery process for sure. I agree with that as well. But for the most part, people don't want to pay for an audit. It's kind of like why they don't want to pay for website maintenance either. That's why I frame that differently. I frame that as website management and try to explain our value in a way that gets them out of thinking that they're just paying to maintain the thing. There's another problem, and that is that deals often take a long time to close. And the reality is that, again, unless your offer is like super streamlined, we can only close those deals once we have enough information and that we're sure that, frankly, both ourselves and our clients are happy with the deal. And it could take weeks. It usually does take weeks to close a project. And even in terms of hours, like a lot of times it does take a lot of hours. Kyle Van Dusen, we'll talk about him more in a minute, but he suggested that, discovery on a project can take anywhere from 4 to 40 hours. I've been there. Honestly, I've been there at like both ends of that. And, you should be paid for that time. Okay. You should be paid for that time. It takes a long time to get there. And even if it doesn't take, terribly long in terms of hours, it takes weeks usually and lots of mental bandwidth. You've got all these things just like, in your head, piling up that are deals that you're trying to close. Okay. So the answer to these problems and more is just one of the most beautiful word combinations in the English language, frankly. And that's this: paid discovery. Paid discovery. In other words, you should be paid before you ever create a WordPress installation, before you ever create an account, before you ever buy a plugin, before you ever set up project management, before you ever, bill for a website. You should be paid for the discovery process. Now, if that's a new or radical concept to you, that's fine and good. I hope this episode changes your life. Now, Kyle Van Dusen, I've mentioned him already. He has a great article on his personal blog, and you can get to that by going to webdesignmba.com/Kyle-PD. So it's my website, webdesignmba.com/Kyle-PD. And he talks about this, and he didn't number them, but it's a bullet list, and it's a lot of ideas and reasons why you should consider paid discovery, because it's all of the aspects that go into the discovery process that you need in order to inform your quote. And pretty much no client, especially once you see this list, I think you're going to be nodding your head in agreement. Pretty much no client has this dialed in when they come to you. Okay, this is not something that they have ready. They don't even know that they need to have this ready. Okay, and I think probably, I'm just going to go out on a limb here and say, you probably do not give yourself enough credit for all of the input that you have to put into the discovery phase of the project. I guarantee you, either intentionally, like consciously or subconsciously, each of the bullet points he mentions have gone through your mind with respect to the projects that you're quoting on a deal. Some of them, again, you probably have very specific thoughts and processes around, some that you have dialed in, and then others, these are things that are just sitting in the back of your mind that you haven't considered thoughtfully, but they're there, and they do inform at some subconscious level your pricing. So take the time to fully read this article, okay? webdesignmba.com/Kyle-PD, okay? And read this article, and it will help to convince you that this is a move you need to make. I'm going to give you here, before talking through a couple additional considerations, I'm going to give you 3 reasons, okay? My top 3 reasons why really you need to be considering this. The first is that you are going to do this work anyway. You are. You're going to do it anyway. And so you might as well get paid for it, right? Why? Like, I have a friend who does sales, and they don't charge They don't charge for paid discovery. And it's an interesting thing because, again, in the industry he's in is very different than what we do. Okay. It's like machining and like high tech stuff. Very, very different than what we do and it's in manufacturing. And they have like months and years long sales cycles. And it's a liability of the job. They might lose the job. But if they win the job, the upside is like millions of dollars in contracts for many years. You just don't have that kind of upside here. You were talking about projects that you might make anywhere from $3,000 to $8,000 to maybe $20,000 on for most of you. Sometimes maybe a little more, sometimes maybe a little less. But we're not talking about deals worth millions of dollars. So every hour that you spend is precious in working towards these, because you need a certain amount of these projects to be able to sustain your business for a year. You got to close these deals. And so if you're spending time closing deals and trying to make deals and sell projects and you're not getting paid for that time, then frankly, you're just wasting that time if the client turns out to be a tire kicker or they go with another solution. So you're going to do this work anyway, because you have to do it in order to quote a project, unless you have a super niche and streamlined product. Okay. Most of you don't. So if you're going to do this work anyway, you might as well get paid. Okay. The second thing is that this eliminates the tire kickers. You only want to work with serious people. You do not want to work with people who are just shopping the market. They're looking around. They're trying to find the cheapest price. Now, I understand that web design has been to a certain degree commoditized, especially with AI. This is why I highly recommend niching down. This is why I highly recommend articulating your value. Okay, secondly, this eliminates the tire kickers. You only want serious people. Okay, this eliminates people that are just shopping the market looking for the lowest price. Now, yes, it's true that web design has become commoditized these days, especially with AI creeping in. And this is where I highly recommend niching down, articulating your value well, and creating a solution, right? Not just selling website design, but creating an end-to-end solution for your perfect client. And that's something that we talk about on the podcast here from time to time. We go into this a lot in my one-on-one coaching. Just full disclosure, if you decide to get into a one-on-one coaching relationship with me, I promise this is one of the first things we're going to be talking about and working through, is who your actual audience is, and then what solution you're creating for that audience that clearly makes you distinct from everybody else. But even with a solution like that, there's probably going to be some variance inside of what you do. And so you're still going to have to quote custom prices to a certain degree. And by the way, I charge paid discovery, even if I'm 90% sure plus that it's just going to be like my standard, like minimum base level project. I try to get that paid discovery in there. Now, I don't always do it. It's context dependent, but I am personally very seriously considering with adding paid discovery in as a necessary part of the project. The only thing I don't want to do, and let me just rabbit trail here for just a minute. Okay, when we're being thoughtful about things, we have to understand the letter of the law versus the spirit of the law, right? I could lay down the law that says we always charge discovery, okay? However, the letter of the law says that we always charge discovery, so we always should. The spirit of the law, though, is that we don't want to waste time, okay? So like in a sort of like perfect, like normal sales cycle, I would say you have a sales call, you do paid discovery, right? If they want to move forward on the project, you could take a deposit and then schedule the project for a few months out or whatever your backlog looks like, and then you go for it, okay? But if I have time in my schedule, I don't need to do a deposit, right? We could just go ahead and start taking the project on right away if the schedule is clear. Similarly, if really there's no discovery required, frankly, if we've articulated everything out and the client is like literally ready to sign up basically on that phone call and doesn't need a whole discovery phase because you've articulated things pretty clearly on that discovery call, then you might not charge discovery, right? You might not do that. Now, I recently had a circumstance where didn't charge discovery. We moved pretty fast. We did negotiate a little bit on the pricing and everything, and we worked out a really good deal that made sense for both of us. And it turns out when I sent the proposal, he said, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm going to need an e-commerce component to this." Okay, no problem. That's going to add some extra cost. And here's what that looks like. We worked through that. But arguably, because I didn't take the time to slow down, charge discovery, go through a discovery process, that got missed. And it almost led to a situation where a few months down the road, guess what? He's saying, "Oh, I forgot to tell you, I'm going to need an e-commerce component on this." And then we have an uncomfortable thing in our relationship, and there's problems. So it's context dependent. There's times when, you don't need to follow a specific process. But what's interesting about that is that usually there's a darn good reason for processes that you've established. And you know what? You should really just follow them. So I think paid discovery is one of those things that you should really consider actually just putting into the process no matter what. Okay, look, this is the process. The first thing we do is we do a paid discovery. This costs X. We'll talk about costs here in a minute, okay? But this costs this much money. Here's what you're going to get at the end of it. Okay, it eliminates these tire kickers. And if they don't want to pay for paid discovery, then arguably they're not serious, because paid discovery is going to cost way less than the actual project. And what they're paying for is ultimately the assurance that you are not overcharging them or undercharging them. That's what they're paying for. And I think that that's an easy sale, which is my third point, that this is an easy sale and also a sales prediction. So what do I mean by those two things? Well, number one, it's an easy sale, of course, because it is frankly an easier sale than thousands of dollars for, a first payment, like a 50% down sort of payment. And it's also an easier sale than an 18-month contract, like I mentioned before. Okay, it's just an easier sale to say, hey, we charge this range, and I'm not saying that you would tell them a range for paid discovery. I would say depending on the project, you could set different prices. But here's what we charge for paid discovery. Boom. Okay, here's what you're going to get at the end of that. Boom. It's one product, one fee right there up front, and it's way easier to sell than a full website project. And it's a sales predictor, meaning if they get the discovery, they will almost certainly go for the full project. Almost certainly. This has been the experience of many folks that I've interacted with who have integrated paid discovery into their business processes, including Kyle, whose article I referenced a few moments ago. Now, I have charged for paid discovery myself a handful of times now, okay? And remember, as I've said before, I don't have like a churn and burn sales process, okay? I take on a very limited number of clients per year because our projects tend to be much bigger projects. We don't do a lot of like brochure websites and things like that. So, since I've started charging for paid discovery, I have only charged it a handful of times now. And only one client has not followed through with the project. Okay. So there was one client that I charged paid discovery for, and that they didn't actually go through with it. All the others have. But it turns out to be the perfect example because it was a big project. I didn't want to waste my time on the discovery. I knew it would take many hours of discovery to figure it all out. They never followed up after they paid the discovery. That was perfect. They never followed up or responded to further attempts to get up with them about completing the project. But that's fine. I made $500 free and clear on that project for most of for work that most of us would do for free and normally do for free. So, huge lesson, I think, that even if they don't go through with the project, great. You haven't wasted your time. You've been paid well for the discovery that you did. And this is not something I had wrote down to talk about, but for what it's worth, we do apply the discovery fee to the project. We actually will take that, like, again, because we do subscription web design, we'll take the paid discovery amount off of the first month's fee if they decide to move forward with us. You don't have to do that, by the way. I'm not sure whether Kyle does that. I'm not sure, whether others do that or not. But I think paid discovery is perfectly great as a, as a separate deliverable that you then charge for the website for later. But I also think that you could apply it to the fee itself. Again, it's just an insurance policy in a sense for you that if they don't move forward with the project, then you get to keep that money that they paid for the discovery. Now, the title of this episode is very important. Discovery is not a hack for getting more money out of clients. That's not what we're trying to do here. And you don't have to overthink it. I mean, this is not something that you have to like make fancy graphs and like a fancy presentation for and like have this whole project plan and all this. You could do that if you want to, but you don't have to. Discovery is itself the deliverable. What does the client get at the end of discovery? They get a fully scoped out quote. That's it. Now they can take that quote and they can go to someone else and pay for them to get the work done, or they can pay for us to do the work with us that we scoped out, and we'll take that money for the fee off the project. Okay, but it is itself a deliverable. You don't have to overthink this. There's nothing you need to do. There's no tool you need to buy. There's no process you need to come up with. If you have a sales call scheduled for today, you could literally right now, today on that sales call, tell them that your process is to first begin by charging for discovery. You can tell them that. And you let them know it's going to take a couple of weeks. We do a couple week discovery process. During that process, I might send you a questionnaire. I might ask you some questions. We might schedule an additional follow-up call to talk through some additional items. It's to make sure that I get you the most accurate quote possible for your project. Here's the link to pay. You can do that today. In fact, I recommend that you do. Now, let me answer two questions that are going to be relevant to my audience and just in general. So first, does this work within subscription web design? Well, the easy answer is yes, because here we are. I teach subscription web design, and I'm telling you about discovery. So yes, it does work with subscription web design. And there are two ways to go about it, really. If you have a sort of more automated subscription web design process, which I don't, but if you are one of those folks, then you could totally use that. You could just add the paid discovery portion into your pipeline. Now, I will say that you may not need to do it if you have, again, if you're in the boat where you have a very automated sales process, you only sell one type of project, everything is pretty much the same. It's like $150 a month. You use templates, whatever. If you're in that boat, then you may not need to do paid discovery. But I'll say this. If you charge and you do manual custom websites and you charge $300 a month plus for your projects, like I do, that's my subscription web design model, then I would consider you, I strongly think that you should consider this, okay? You really should do this because it will just add another layer of safety and security to your projects. By the way, I think you could literally just get away with charging what you would normally charge for your first month's fee as discovery. And you could say, yep, we're going to do this discovery. Yep, it's a paid discovery. By the way, if you decide to move forward, the first month of your website is free. And then you just start the invoicing after that. Okay. Or you could take it off the setup fee. If the project ends up that there's going to be a setup fee, you can take the money off the setup fee. Or if there's a setup fee, and you're charging for that separately, after the discovery is done, you just let them know, hey, you're still going to get the setup fee, but your first month of the actual website payment is free. So there's lots of different ways that you can frame it and that you can do it. The point is, add in this paid discovery. You can do it within subscription web design, no problem. Now, I will say that if you're not doing subscription web design, then you should just almost certainly, without any reservation or question, add this into your process. Because if you're charging $3,000, $5,000, $8,000, $10,000, $13,000, $20,000, $30,000 for your projects, you're going to first want to make sure that those quotes are very accurate. And so a client should be highly incentivized in those scenarios to pay for paid discovery. And then the last thing I want to address is what to charge. Well, just to be honest, I can't really tell you what to charge. I'll tell you what I charge. It's typically somewhere between $250 and $500 for me, depending on where things land. So it's literally less than $1,000 just to make sure that we've got a good, accurate quote for the project. Now, I've been involved in quoting some projects where, I would have liked to maybe got paid $1,000 or more for the discovery. And You can set arbitrary rules around this. Okay, if it's an e-commerce site, it's $1,000. If it's a brochure site, it's $500. Or if you do subscription web design, it's basically the cost of a normal website project's first month, and they get their first month free. That's fine too. But again, part of the discovery is you're not going to know what that amount is necessarily until you get it done. So that framing may not work for that. But anyway, what I charge is anywhere from $250 to $500. And those numbers have worked great for me. I've always felt great about getting paid for that work. And when the client decides to move forward, it's just always a really great experience, because then we have so many of our questions answered ahead of time and don't have lots of hemming and hawing and back and forth on the project. So start with this, like today. Start charging for paid discovery, add it into your process, and this will help you to get some commitment from clients and have a sales process that's easier to sell, and you'll feel so much more confident when you're finally quoting the project. And everybody will be on the same page and know that it was a quote done thoughtfully, intentionally, and you don't feel bad about the time you took away from working on other projects to spend to make sure this project got quoted well. All right. If you have questions about this, please go to YouTube. Throw them in the comments. I would love to address your questions in a future episode, or they're in the comments. And if you're intrigued by this concept of paid discovery, let me know. And please let me know if this episode was helpful for you. If you are interested in being coached directly by me to help you implement paid discovery or anything else in your website design business, we talk about mindset, we talk about money, we talk about methods, we talk about messaging, we talk about lots of things inside the context of our one-on-one coaching, whatever you need help with in the moment. And so I would love for you to schedule a free 50-minute coaching call with me. Again, this is not a sales call. This is not a discovery call for future coaching. It's an actual coaching call. Okay, I'm willing to do one of those for you completely for free, in hopes that we might be able to move into a further relationship. But if not, I hope you come away from that one free coaching call with more value than you could have possibly imagined and a direction for your business. You can schedule that by going to webdesignmba.com/coaching. And I can't wait to see you there and meet you in person. All right. Thank you so much for your time, for listening to this podcast. I hope you found it helpful. We'll see you next time on the Web Design MBA.